Okay, starting at the back, I'm going to kind of go over the different things that I've had to do as far as modifying the frame to accept the 72 bed cab and front clip. Okay, so first of all, on each frame rail, I've had to notch a section, a little piece out of the top of the frame, and had to do that on both sides. As far as the rear bumper, it fit pretty good. I'm sure there's different styles of bumpers and styles of mounting brackets that go on the 72s. I've seen some brackets that just come straight out, and then others that are, bent like this one is. So basically, this one, you're just putting the bumper in there and kind of marking the holes where you want them to be at, and try to line them up, and use the holes that's already there if possible. So on the frame part of it, I've had to elongate one on the bottom, and then it goes like that. So I've drilled them two out, and I've got one, up at the top there that lines up with this one there. And so that's that's going to get me very, very close. Now I may end up having to tweak these lower ones. The back one has already got some elongation in it, but I know from test fitting it that it's going to be very close right there. And that's pretty much, well, this truck also had a trailer hitch on the back of it, and the rear bumper is going to sit pretty much on top of this like the factory one did. On the factory one, they had two bolts that came up through these holes and bolted to the bumper just for added rigidity. And I believe I'm going to be able to do that to mine, or doing it on the 72 bumper as well. So as far as the bed mounting up to the frame, it's basically going to be held on with 6 bolts as it stands right now. I may add another 2 bolts. I can do that fairly easily, I think. It's going to have 2 at the back, and I'll back up and say that I'm using the factory holes in the 72 bed. I'm not making any new holes in the bed. I'm using the holes that are there and just making them, and making brackets on this frame that will accommodate them. So the 2 rearmost bolts ended up being right here, just inside of this frame cross member. And I know when I had the bed sitting on here and I dropped the bolt down, it was real tight fit just on the side of this frame rail. So I knew that I would need to notch that in in order to make that fit the way it should. And so there's one of them on each side, and all I did was take a piece of black metal pipe, and I cut a notch out of the cross member and then just set that in there and welded it on both sides. So I'll drop the bolt down through the top, or through the top of the bed, and then just put a nut and washer on the bottom. And then the second bolt hole is going to be right here, and I've already got some brackets welded off to the side. Now these brackets I'm going to be welding some kind of a brace on this. I don't like that sticking out by itself like that, so it'll be braced up somehow, probably to the bottom part of the frame. But that's the basic design that I had for the second row of bolts on the bed. And all of these are set up to where I can, so I guess I should say they're all a little bit low as far as these brackets that I've made, because I want to be able to put some kind of insulator, either plastic or rubber, between the frame where the bed sits and the bed itself. The factory used on the 2005, they used a lot of these, and they would just go into holes on the frame, and then any bed cross member would set directly on top of that. So I'll be using something like this, pretty much over every hole that there's going to be, where the bed's going to be setting and bolted through a bracket. Moving on forward, let me move this charcoal canister. So on the 72 bed, there is a small cross member, and on the factory 72 frame, this cross member in the bed was not supported, and it caused the bed to sag in the middle because there was no support under it. Well, and it was right in the middle of the bed. I mean, right, probably 3 feet in on a 6-foot bed. So I've had a piece of this C channel around my shop, and it was the right width. I just had to cut 2 or 3 inches off of it. So, and that's what that center cross member is going to set on. So that will help make the bed stronger in the center and take care of that sag that it had in it, and help the bed look flatter as you're looking at it, because it was an obvious a sag or a bow in the middle of the bed. So moving on up, the front mount for the bed ended up right here, and so I made these brackets out of some of the pieces of the frame that I cut out of this when I shortened it, and so the dot is where I got to drill a hole at. So the frame, or not the frame, but the cross member for the bed is going to set on the top of this, there, and over there as well. These are all fitted while I've got the bed on there, and it would have been, without a second camera person, it would have been impossible for me to film this as it was going on. I don't have a second camera person, so I just had to do it, and I'm going to coming back like I am now and explaining to you kind of what I've done. Excuse me. So it was just a matter of cutting, looking at it first, getting in your head approximately what you want done or what needs to be done, and then just finding a piece of metal that kind of fit it. And it's a lot of trial and error. You put one up there and you say, okay, I need to cut a little bit off of it, and so on and so forth, until you finally get it right. Now, the other 2 bolts that I said I might add later to secure the bed down are right here on this factory bracket for for the factory bed. So the holes, or there's a bracket, there's a brace, cross member on the 72 bed that fits perfectly on top of this, but it does not have any holes to mount, from the top and floor of the bed to even mount to anything. It's just a beefy cross member that goes across the bottom of the 72 bed, and it just happens to fit right on the top of this. So what I may do is weld a nut into that cross member and just bolt it up from the bottom. I may or may not do that. I'm not sure at this point, but probably will wind up doing that. The other thing that underneath the bed that has to be dealt with if I use it is this charcoal canister. So as it sits now in this factory bracket, it hits the bottom of the bed. When you set the bed down, the bed hits this thing before it hits anything else. So that thing is going to have to be lowered approximately 2 inches, 1.5 to 2 inches, I would say 2, just to be safe. And that is if you use this, if you don't delete this fume recovery system from the vehicle. If you do delete it from the vehicle, then it doesn't matter. You just cut the bracket off and keep going. But if you plan on using this system or integrating it in with your engine, you will need to lower that, or it will hit the bed. So that pretty much covers what I had to do to make the bed fit. And the bed fits right on the top of the frame, with the exception of this, which it was a short cross member, so I had to find a piece this tall to make that work. But everywhere else the bed sets, on the back it sets flat on the frame, and right here it sets flat on these brackets. So the bed dictated where the cab in the front clip, and turned out it worked out pretty good. It's going to look really nice with a set of bigger tires on it, because it's setting out like right now it looks like it's got a body lift. So once the owner gets some new tires on it, bigger tires, it's going to look really nice. So moving on to the cab, the factory cab mounts were right in here. Those had to go away because I didn't need them and they were in the way. And the two on the front were right there. So the way, and this has kind of been the theme throughout, this 2005 frame is considerably wider than the 72 frame. And that's not a secret. A lot of the trucks have gotten wider. They got a wider stance, wider frame, just the way the industries went. So it's making since everything's more narrow on the 72, it's making the bolt holes fit either right on top of the frame or to the inside of it. And that theme has carried on through, even under the cab where it sits. So as it has turned out, so I can get some light. The cab mounts for the rear are right there, and let's zoom or pan up there. You can kind of get a sense of where that is going to be. So it's hitting just inside the frame, and it was going to be extremely awkward to try to use the factory mounts, and at first I thought I might be able to cut them off and then rotate them and have them fit over on this side, but I could probably made it work on the passenger side, but over on the driver's side I had the fuel tank which sat here, and I was having to work around it, and it was not going to work with that mindset for a cab mount. There just wasn't sufficient room, and I couldn't get the structural integrity that I needed for a cab mount on doing it like that. So what I came up with was to completely do away with the factory mounts altogether as far as using them. And I took a piece of angle iron. Let's turn around here and I'll get a little better view of it. But took a piece of angle iron that I had, and this is heavy stuff. And I scored it and bent it and then re-welded it. So it spans the entire width of the frame, and I had to notch out, starting right here, about an inch, and then all the way across, and that is to accommodate the fuel tank. Otherwise, this would have hit the fuel tank, but this gives me sufficient clearance up over the top of the fuel tank, and life is good. So where the bolts that hold the cab on are going to wind up being right in this area here, and I've also got them marked on the other side. These are the blocks that I'll be using. Now they won't be this tall because I don't have but about an inch to play with under here. So I'll just cut these down, about an inch tall to start with, and slide them in there, and they should be pretty close. And then I'll just run my bolts down through the top, and I'll have nuts down on the bottom to secure that with. So that pretty much covers the rear cab mounts. That is where I sectioned the frame, or spliced it, whatever you want to call it. I may have covered that in another video. I think I did. But anyway, it's cut at an angle, 45-degree angle, down like that, and I welded all that up, front and back, and then put a plate over the top of it. And that took care of the frame section part of it. This is the front cab mount, and I was able to, use at least the hood of what I call the hood of the factory cab mount off of the 2005, and also able to use the rubber insulator. And anything long and slender like this is a good way to line up your holes from the top, because you want to come out right there. And once you get that, because you got to have your front clip bolted onto this, because you've got to be centered in with your your wheel well. The tires got to be centered in with the opening on the fender. So once you have that distance right and the same on each side, you should come out, with whatever you're using here, a screwdriver, a piece of tubing. It should fall down through there and hit about the same place on the frame on each side, and that's the way this one has turned out. It hits right about in the front of that elongated hole, and kind of to the inside of it. That's where it hits on both sides. So you just want everything to be symmetrical. If the frame's square and the cab's square, then that stuff should be square as well. If it isn't, then something's not right. And then there's where I cut off the factory cab mounts. So moving on to the radiator support, the factory radiator support mounts were come right over this tubing, and they didn't line up either, as everything is wider on this, as I said earlier. What it ended up being hitting was just to the inside of the frame rail, looking from the outside in, and that's where my factory, my 72 radiator support, that's where it hit on the top of the frame on both sides. It's the same spot. So I found that I could use, my factory bracket, and my insulator got me the right height that I needed, and I just welded a nut down in the frame, and so that's what the radiator support is going to fasten to, and then that on both sides, and that's got that taken care of. Now, moving on to the front bumper. I knew it was going to be a challenge. I was not naive going into that for sure, because the bumpers are totally different from a 72 to a 2005, as you can imagine. So a lot of the frame horn on the front had to be cut off, and this was a lot of trial and error. Took a lot of time to do this, and there's not any good way to do it. You just kind of go with what works. So what I came up with, because the 72 bumper, has a bracket on the top, and then it has with bolt in it, and it has one in the front down lower on the bumper. So I just once again took the top section of the frame that I'd cut out, and lined it up, knew about what my height needed to be, and cut some holes in the top to where I can adjust it. And don't just drill one single hole and think that's going to work, because it never will. Even the factory uses slotted holes because they have issues with them also. So it's no sin to have elongated holes on the bumper. So I just got that where I needed it, and then I started working on the brackets for the side. There again, a lot of trial and error, and it's still got to be ground and cleaned up and all that before I sandblast it. But the bumper fits nice, and it's symmetrical, so it shouldn't give me all that much trouble getting it back, putting it together. The only thing that I do like is the side brackets, and they're going to be they're pretty straightforward. I think I'll probably have to cut them down and then re-weld them to shorten them, but they're basically going to wind up fastening to the side of the frame and then coming out to the to the bumper. So they're going to be a lot easier, especially since I've got everything off now. I'll just lay the bumper back up there and get those where I want them, and then drill my holes, and probably put a nut, weld a nut in there to bolt it up to. And hopefully that will be everything. As you can see, I've got the engine ready and transmission ready to come out. I've already got the heads pulled and got them in the machine shop, so they can get checked out. And yeah, I believe. And then the steering shaft, that was the other thing I need to go over. That was a challenge as well. I had to use pieces from the old one as well as the new one, or from the 72 as well as the 05. So I had to weld on the splines for the 72 column, but then I had to use the U-joints off of the 2005. So I had to get a piece of pipe or tubing that would fit over this and drill it, and get a bolt, and then I had to shorten it down here on the bottom quite a bit, probably 3 inches, to make it fit. This is the 2005 shaft, and you can tell it telescopes in and out, to allow you to get the spline off, which is works out really nice. So the only thing that I would caution anybody, this is a very critical piece, as you can imagine. This is something you don't want breaking or falling off, because you lose your steering at that point. So if you are not a accomplished welder, get someone that is to do this for you. I preheated everything to around 400 or 500 degrees before I welded it, because that helps the welder to, the weld to melt in with the metal that you're welding, and makes it much stronger. If you can look that up on Google or anywhere and validate what I'm saying. It's called preheating, basically. But anyways, got that part of it done as well. And I guess this is where I'm going to end this. So there'll be probably one long video, or maybe two videos, detailing all this stuff, and then detailing me making the fuel door for the bedside, a few other things like that. But anyway, probably the next video you see is when I get this thing blasted and then maybe painted. I'll be blasting and painting this one and the 73 Scout pretty much at the same time. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you later. Goodbye.